Hello, and welcome to Ghouls Disability Day of Horror. Uh, I am your host, Ariel Basca, along with my co-host.
Rabia Sitabi.
And we are delighted that we get to talk to you further about disability and horror. This is a day of panels specifically celebrating the disability community and its relationship to horror. And our panel today is specifically on mental health and horror and the mind-body connection explicitly. And so today we are delighted to have for this panel some very, very special guests who have all done work in the horror space. And so I would love to have everybody kind of go around and introduce themselves really quickly. To recap, if you were not here for our previous panel, I'm Ariel Basca. I'm a multiply disabled horror and documentary filmmaker. My horror short about medical gaslighting, Our First Priority, which I wrote and directed, won the Disability Advocacy Award from Superfest Disability Film Festival and was an official selection of Fright Fest UK, among others. I've also produced several projects, both narrative and documentary, including Mike Mignola drawing monsters. I was a speaker at South by Southwest in 2022, along with two of these jokers, Rabia and Adam. And I am the founder and co-host of Ride the Omnibus, a podcast parked at the intersection of pop culture and social justice with Rabia.
That's me. Oh, and please describe yourself, Ariel.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I am a white woman with blonde hair, pleasantly plump, wearing a pink shirt and a multicolored shawl in front of a purple poster on a white wall that says Our First Priority in white letters. Thank you.
Awesome. I'll try to make it brief on myself as well. I'm a queer disabled pop culture expert and marketing strategist born in Europe of Asian and African descent. I am Indian and Egyptian. I'm the director of marketing of the Imagine Fantastic Film Festival, the largest fantastic film festival in the Benelux, and part of the Millier Foundation. And I've worked with numerous horror and genre film festivals internationally, either as host, programming, publicity, marketing, and as with special projects. I regularly appear on Dutch radio and television. That's where I'm from. I'm from the Netherlands, Amsterdam, to talk about pop culture. And I am a co-host of two podcasts, Right the Omnibus, as Ariel just mentioned, which is a podcast parked at the intersection of pop culture and social justice, and The Culture Curators, which is a podcast that I do with Benjamin Frankenberg, and that is about film, food, and tentacles and kinky stuff. Oh, and to describe myself, I am a melanated lady. My pronouns are she, her, by the way. I'm wearing glasses. My hair is slicked back. It's normally curly and super long up to my butt, but now it's slicked back in a bun. I'm wearing an oversized Dreamers Club mint sage hoodie because it's very, very cold here in Amsterdam right now, and it's evening, and a black t-shirt underneath.
Cool. And I'm going to ask, we'll go around in alphabetical order by first name, if that's okay. And we'll start with Adam, then Addison, then Cypher. And just so everybody is clear, I wasn't totally clear about this on the first panel, so I will be clear. There will be fucking swearing in this panel. So
Oh yeah, that's fucking
free.
allowed.
I was gonna do it anyway, and then just ask for forgiveness later. But
Yeah, no.
I'm glad we know now. So
It is
Okay.
our French, so don't pardon it.
Yeah.
I would never agree to this if I knew there'd be swearing.
Oh, well. Okay. All right, Adam, you're up.
I'm Adam Stovall. I wrote, directed, produced, edited, and a bunch of other stuff. The feature film of Ghost Waits, which played Fright Fest Glasgow and Fright Fest UK, Screamfest, and a bunch of other festivals, and it won some awards, some of which are behind me. And there's also fan art behind me because it's amazing that fan art is a thing that our little movie inspires. I also was a speaker at South by Southwest with Ariel this year. That's where we actually saw Addison's film, which is amazing. And I am wearing wearing Ariel's favorite t-shirt of mine. It's a black t-shirt where Freddy Krueger is telling you to always follow your dreams. And that's me.
Addison?
Well, I produced Our First Priority. That's right.
And self-description.
That's I'm a 5'9" white guy with hair that used to be brown and now is mostly gray, and a beard that's becoming more and more white with every passing day, and the black T-shirt that I've already talked about.
Okay.
I'm really bad at these things.
You're doing amazing, sweetie.
Thank you.
Mina, yeah. Hi, I'm Addison. Hyman. My pronouns are he, him. I am a writer-director. I wrote and directed this film called Hypochondriac, which premiered at South by Southwest this past year. And you can watch it now as of a month ago in America. It's a horror movie based off my mental breakdown, hence, I guess, why I'm a part of this panel, because I suffer from mental illness, which don't we all? I am a 6'3" white dude who's also Puerto Rican, but you can't tell because I'm white. I have a beautiful mullet that I've been growing. I like to call it a mullet hawk. I have like sandy hair. I'm wearing a black T-shirt from Fantasia. I can show it, which is where one of my first short films premiered, and it's a 2019 one with Pitbull in a spaceship flying through space. I also have a beard and a pretty sexy mustache, and I'm wearing little headphone things by Bose because I'm also fancy, or just travel a lot, and I needed noise-canceling headphones to drown out all the children who cry on planes. Did I do it all? Yes, okay.
You're good. You're good.
Yes, you are. And by the way, Addison, I was there at your world premiere at South by when you did that first showing, and when you were doing that Q&A, that just sold me. I was like, oh,
I
more
went to
now.
theater school. I'm just a performer who now works behind the scenes, and then I'm a goofy idiot. Anyway, thank you.
And I am so delighted that Cypher is on this call too. And I am so happy, my fellow Respectability Lab member, Cypher, if you would not mind introducing yourself.
I like forgot half of this. Since I'm neurodivergent, I got like every third word for some reason. Hi everyone, thank you for having me. I'm Cypher. Everyone here has a lovely background. I used to be an animator. That's all I got was no, not really. But there's more, but too much. The last things I was working on was Solar Opposites and Rick and Morty. So we got the sci-fi. I call it horror. I mean, I had an episode about Hellraiser. That was kind of fun. And I am, as Ariel said, I am also a lab member of Respectability for 2022. And currently I am launching my own multimedia production company. So there'll be a couple short films coming out with a lot of mystery horror dramas at the intersection of like cosmic horror and supernatural. So that'll be fun if you guys want to tune in. It's basically set up as a mystery, so we're just getting little bits here and there, and we're following an investigator trying to figure out what the hell's going on, and it leads him to a speakeasy, which is going to set up for the remaining podcast, and it happens every October, starting this October 1st. So there's that bit. I have a black sweater with little animated ghosts. Also, it's my soul that animation took, so I wanted to commemorate that part of 2D animation. Haha. I have short black hair. I am Asian, and I'm fairly light skinned in unfortunately, a dim room since I have a lot of sensory processing issues this week. So sorry, guys, you can't really quite see me. And then I have pink glasses, and I think that's really it. There's moons in the back and a little bit of the lights, and then just barren white walls.
Oh. Well, it is a delight to have everyone here, and I am so excited about this conversation. And I want to kind of get started by asking everyone, when you think about, issues with mental health and horror, is there a work that in particular influenced you as a person when you think about your mental health and horror in particular? Is there one work that really resonated particularly with you more than any other? in terms of helping you understand your own mental health journey or any sort of issues that you've ever had? I'm keeping this as wide and as loose as I possibly can.
Well, it's hard to boil it down to one. I think that's what my issue is. I'm not sure about Adam and Addison. Like, I can give you a solid 3 that
Okay.
that can basically encompass it all, really. Like, so I relate the most to like Sadako from Ringu, specifically to Ex Machina. Like, I relate to Ava more, and then I Saw the Devil, of the Korean film, and I relate to the main character, So Yoon. So that, and these 3 in specifically, I Saw the Devil is the only one where it's actually the protagonist, whereas the other 2 is, I guess you can call the antagonist of the film. But being like neurodivergent, you always feel excluded from society no matter what, even if you try to assimilate. So with Ex Machina, it was very much that you are trapped and you are forced to be this thing for another person, and in this case, it's it's a little bit of being Asian, being Vietnamese. It's a little bit of being neurodivergent, where that connection is just not there. So you're basically just assimilating all the time and not really like getting to be your own consciousness. And whereas in Ringu, you're put on stage to be entertainment for the world, which is not that different than Ex Machina, except it gets to a point where people start to fear you because you are you, and some people don't like that. And then with I Saw the Devil, it's just a very interesting way to portray a person who's seen the ugliness of the world, but they have to walk through another part of the world where there is people who are not exposed to that. And so you're walking this fine line of, I know how ugly and horrible people can be, but the people in my life are not exposed to this. So protect them or don't protect them. In which case, he was engulfed with anger, and anger itself can be extremely destructive before you get to properly grieve and let go. So I think those 3 technically encompasses how I feel about the world, and it shows up a bit in my work.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Hmm.
All right. Adam, Addison, anyone want to tackle this next?
Sure, I got it. Yeah, I got it. I mean, mine's a very obvious one because my movie homages it so completely. It's Donnie Darko. So I mean, I don't want to be like, like it's so funny because like people are like, oh yeah, so your movie was influenced by Donnie Darko, right? I'm like, no, I just have a person in an animal costume haunting the main character because I like furries. Which I mean, no disrespect to the furry community, like more power to kink, but like, yeah, I think something about that movie specifically that I really saw myself in is the moment when Donnie's sitting on the bed with his mom, and he's crying, and he turns to his mother and he says, "How does it feel to have a wacko for a son?" And she says, "It feels fantastic." And that movie felt so, I don't know, just like like teen angst and all this like kind of outsiderism, but also like the realization that like you know I don't know, when I had my mental breakdown I felt so alone, and I totally understand like that kind of like low point of just being like, man, I'm fucked up, I'm so low, I'm the worst person in the world. And to have someone, not in this case with my mom, because my movie deals with all my mommy issues, but like friends or anybody else who like can see through me, and they're like, oh yeah, you're still a person who matters and exists despite whatever you deal with in your life. And if anything, like it's more impressive that you can get through your brain and come out of the other side and are still able to function as a human. So yeah, that movie really spoke to me, which is horror, but it's also sci-fi. I would say it's horror. But I guess it's more of a mystery. But I could think of like Midsommar is another one, like poor Florence Pugh. just like having to deal with that whole family, just watching her whole family be murdered. And I identify with that. Not that. Oh my God. Anyway, Adam, why don't you go, and I have nothing to hide behind. So I can just disappear from frame in shame.
Look, this is a
Lawrence-
safe space.
This is a totally safe space.
First of all, and second of all, like because of all of our different, we're here because we have different stuff going on.
Yeah.
As someone who's very 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 distinctly like I'm definitely an ND. Like I
Yeah.
will start to like look away at one point, not because I'm like disinterested or anything
Yeah.
like that, or start talking weird. Because
Yeah.
when my ND kicks in, which is all the time, my words come out in a way that other people, like neurotypical people, might misconstrue as weird or other. But this is a safe space. We all understand the way you're expressing yourself, so don't feel like you should have to apologize.
Great. Yeah.
Madison,
yeah.
she gets the best revenge, by the way. Like I just wanted to, I was
Oh,
like,
no,
listen, she
she
gets a
definitely
bigger family.
does. Oh,
she
she
traded
does.
in.
Yeah.
She'll be okay.
Honestly, yeah, she's gonna be great. She's gonna wear that flower crown and enjoy the delicious meat, and then jump off a cliff at 75 and die.
Hey.
Adam, why don't you go? I'm gonna just.
I did not grow up a horror kid. I came to horror kind of late, and not say I wasn't aware of it. Like I watched the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I watched like late night Friday night monsters and Tales from the Crypt and Tales from the Dark Side of the series, all that stuff. But like I was a comedy nerd, so I tended to focus on funny horror. So like Evil Dead, and it wasn't until I was in my 30s. My sister's then husband, whenever I would visit, he's like, "It's stupid that you've never seen Sisters. Sit down." And so I got this like crash course in horror, and was just like, "Oh, there's so much more to this than I thought and had been told by society at large." So I came too late, but also in terms of like mental health, my experience of depression has never been like it's a thing that I have. It's just the walls. It's not even the wallpaper. It's just the walls. And so it was always there. So I also kind of came late to understanding, a mental health journey, because, if it's like language. If you grow up in France, it's not weird that everybody's speaking French. It's when you go somewhere else, you're like, what the hell are these people talking about? I didn't know that I had this depression. I just thought it was how everything worked. And at a certain point, it was like, oh, the world is operating on a frequency that I don't have access to. And that's kind of where the suicidal ideation came from. Because it was never, I won't say there was no self-disparaging element to it, because there was just like, I'm the worst. I'm not worthy of existence is how it felt a lot. And the process of making a Ghost Waits, which was like, I feel a strong kinship to Hypochondriac, because like I made a movie about almost killing myself. Yeah, like just watching your Q&A, I was like, oh, we're friends. Like I want to hug this person. So the movie that like leapt to mind in the context of this question is actually like hanging right here. Synecdoche, New York, which might not be people's idea of a horror film, but the backstory of it is that Sony had a meeting with Spike Jonze and Charlie Kaufman and said, we want you guys to make a horror movie. This is the budget. Do whatever you want. And then Spike decided to go make Where the Wild Things Are, and Charlie went home and thought, what scares me? The relentless progression of time. And I remember this was back when I was working for Creative Screenwriting Magazine. We did a Q&A screening of it. And I'm watching this movie, and I'm really just like feeling every bit of it in my bones. And then I remember the experience of watching Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind opening day and thinking, oh my God, this is the greatest movie ever. And then watching the world misunderstand it and feeling very alone. Just like, wait, like, did I just see the wrong movie? Like, what the? And so I'm watching Synecdoche, New York, and I start having that fear of like, oh God, what is the world going to do to this movie? Because like, it's so special and fragile, and like, what is the wrong lesson that people can take? And like, I started like distancing myself from the film, like as I was watching it. And then the funeral scene happens with that eulogy, and like every single bit of me just like broke open. and I was like, oh, there's no distancing. This movie and me are the same, and I will fight anyone who misunderstands it, because like it is a movie that is so clearly about one thing, and not just one thing, but like, and that character, Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, like I identified a lot with just like the struggle of having a thing in your head that you're not sure you'll ever actually be able to get out, and being your own worst enemy in terms of like worrying about your ability to execute something that you think is special. And it really like coming down, so much of what we do comes down to luck. I think I've wandered off the path of answering the question at this point. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, it's all about your relationship to horror. So
Yeah.
that's
And,
okay.
And I mean, we're all filmmakers. We worked very hard to make the films that we made. But I still think that there's a lot of luck. And I am a believer that luck is opportunity meeting preparation, and that the harder I work, the luckier I get. But like, I know a lot of people who work hard who never get lucky. And so my relationship to horror is as a community and as a genre, and it's so welcoming in a way that like when you're not a part of the community, it feels very othered, and it's just like, oh, those are strange people in their black t-shirts with their metal, and like you don't want to trust them with your kids. Whereas like once you get into the horror community, you're like, oh my god, like please have all the children, like you're the most beautiful people and you have the best hearts, and like just because a skull is giving you side eye, like you don't need to be afraid of us. So that's kind of, I think that's my answer.
Oh, all right. Now I want to know Rabia's answer, talking about specifically for you, was there one work that kind of helped you understand mental health and horror and your relationship to both?
Oh, that's a difficult one because like Cypher, there's not just one for me. I can pick like a top 2 or 3 or 4 maybe. Definitely
I'll listen to
Pulse.
you. I'll
Yeah.
listen to you do 20 movies if you want. Just like keep listing them.
Well,
I'm a
look,
horror nerd, so
don't give me that opportunity, Addison. I will actually like take over the whole panel and start talking for an hour and a half until my battery runs out, and you'll see me like slump in. So
Just fades out. It's just Rabia talking still.
let me
Her
let me
voice slows
contain it to a
down.
few. Yeah, exactly.
Fine.
You'll go once on
Okay, well, let's start with one.
let me give you 2. Let me give you
Okay.
like for the first one is going to be Pulse or Kaido, the Japanese movie. That for me, when it came out, I was pretty young, so like in my teens, late teens probably, and it deals with the loneliness and depression that comes with actually connecting to the internet. Basically, this movie is saying like we can connect to the internet, we can connect to the world now, but technology brings this intense loneliness with it as well, and people were literally in their depression, in their state, their mental state, like disappearing and giving up their lives, being absorbed also by the beings obviously taking over the earth, because they were coming through the fray. And you know there were so many ghosts, they were now coming into our world through the internet. But at the same time, I felt that like I grew up in a time with MSN Messenger, and I'm gonna really give my age here, like MSN Messenger and like pre-BBM, like BlackBerry
Bring back
Messenger and
Angel
that kind of
Fire.
stuff.
Dial-up.
Exactly. Like MySpace, and here in the Netherlands we had CU2 and Party Peeps, and where you had to like write HTML and CSS code to like make your page look pretty.
Whoa.
But I come from a very traumatic background. I've been through a lot as a kid, and on top of that, my neurodivergency was not diagnosed until I was pretty far into my 30s, which I currently am. It's very recent even. So I was not only fighting like all the trauma that I was dealing with, but on top of that, the depression that came with it as such a young child as I was, having gone through so much trauma already, and then being able to connect with the world and realizing how alone I felt in my physical presence where I was. There were people out there in the universe, in the world, on the internet, that was able to connect to, but I would never be able to connect, like physically look at them or otherwise, but they had maybe similar stories or similar feelings. And I was like, I'm not the weirdo, I'm just the weirdo here. And that made me intensely lonely. But Cairo had a way of like Pulse, the movie, had a way of capturing that in film that just it snapped me back to that feeling of how it was to be on online forums as a 14-year-old, paying $2.50 at this easy internet cafe to be online and to connect, and then come home back into my bubble of trauma, my cocoon of depression, and having to then survive in that, and being called weird or not trying hard enough, or you know being othered so much in my own, like, quote unquote safe space, because, well, I'm Asian and North African. Dealing with mental health, especially back in the 80s and 90s, was not something that was a possibility for us, especially if you're from migrant parents. So Pulse was one that really spoke to me. Carrie was also one that really spoke to me. Obviously, I'm talking about the 76 version. Yes, the Brian De Palma version, obviously. I saw that on TV. It was on reruns, and I watched it and I was like, that's me. I am that bullied girl. I am that weird girl with the super religious mom who's trying to fight back, and she gets it. And I don't have superpowers, but damn, I would do the same thing if I did. Like, if I could get back to my beliefs like that, damn, I would. But again, that being othered, feeling as if you're an alien in your body. She was not told things about her own progression into adulthood that, made her a target. And she was dealing with a lot of trauma and mental health issues as well, combined with all of that spirituality and quote unquote religious experience dumped on top of it. So Carrie was, for me, just, it wasn't even a horror movie. It was just looking like a reality show with some supernatural elements at that point. And it was like, yeah, I understand this. This speaks to me on a very, very real level that as a young girl back then, I didn't understand how deep that went until I could put words and context to it as an adult later on in my life.
Yeah. For
Yeah.
me, like, horror, and looking specifically at horror in the extreme, has been the thing that for me has really helped me understand my trauma and my experiences on the whole, I would say. And so for me, like, Martyrs and Tetsuo the Iron Man are the two films I would list as major ones that have helped me kind of uncover the depths of, like, both how I have felt about myself and the world around me. I mean, I know those are two extremely fucked up movies, and if you wanna plumb the depths of depravity, go for it. But I do really want to say that I think for a lot of people, um, there's this resonance that you find when you see violence on screen that in some way validates or mirrors violence you felt in your life or in your head in some way. And so I think for me, like, I always needed the extreme to kind of validate what was going on in my own brain in some form or fashion. As a kid with depression, CPTSD, complex PTSD, anxiety, depression, various forms of trauma, as well as ADD. And, not understanding who you are is such a fundamental part of all of this. I think it's kind of baked into horror in some small way. I mean, maybe I'm curious how people feel about getting to know themselves through the act of watching film. Like, is this something that we think, on the whole, is unique to horror, or do you feel like this is something that you could do through any genre? Like, romantic comedy, for example? Could you know yourself well through romantic comedy? Adam, you're nodding your head, so I'm going to call on you first.
Yeah, I think, you know, that's kind of one of the main functions of art, you know, and so I think it happens in any genre, you know, because there's crap in every genre and there's amazing stuff in every genre. Like, I growing up a comedy nerd, like, yeah, I learned a lot about. I definitely, you know, I felt less alone, which I think means that I learned a lot about myself and about people. Like, I always say, like, one of the key instances in kind of the journey of like learning that I, you know, realizing that I'm a storyteller and everything was seeing Mrs. Doubtfire and seeing like all these people just like weeping and realizing like, oh, if I make you laugh, then I can like really mess you up with emotional truths because like laughter like drops the guard. Like that's interesting to know. Like let's mark that down for later. You know, I mean, he's obviously not the greatest person, but Annie Hall is a movie that you can take a lot from. And like, especially, I mean, that's a movie I kind of grew up with. And I'm going to switch movies entirely, but like, I just watched Jerry Maguire the other night, and like, it hits very differently once you've A, been radicalized with leftist politics, and B, just like grown up and you're not a teenage boy anymore. Like, I was just watching, like, why is that Dorothy Boyd's reaction? Like, I don't like, how is he? Oh, right, it's Cameron Crowe. She's not a real person. It's a fantasy individual. That's right. Like, I think the way that we watch things and the way that we repeatedly watch things, it kind of shows us, it helps us kind of understand our own growth as a person, because why am I reacting to this differently than I did when I was 12? You know, why is this joke not funny anymore? Or, you know, just your basic awareness of people and how everybody is a person with their own interior lives. Like, and maybe it's my neurodivergence. Like when I was growing up, I knew that everybody was people, but like there was definitely kind of I didn't understand that we were all equally people, I think. And it was watching film and TV where it's like, oh, we all have these interior lives. Like everybody goes home and is like metaphorically playing with their action figures to like, you know, not just recreate movies that you've seen, but like also just like making up scenes of like, this is how I would have won that argument. I'm sharing too much. Who goes next?
You can share. Hey, again, safe, beautiful, safe space. I mean, you know, I didn't explain my background before. I'm in a hotel room. I have not slept in this bed. I just checked into this bed. But that's also not what we're talking about. The answer, what we're actually trying to talk about is if movies can change lives. And so I think
Is that bed gonna eat you, Addison? Is that why you won't check in?
yeah, I'll pull oh man, I just want that Johnny Depp crop top though. Like I've been thinking about it. I've got the headphones already, and I just need the crop top, and then I will just disappear.
I love that.
But in terms of what of your question is, in terms of that, as a queer person, you know, like there was no queer movies that were explicit, other than and then uncovering, you know, like Hellraiser, Nightmare on Elm Street 2, like there. And as we start, like, you know, like going back, and I'm like, but I was as a kid, I'm like, I don't know what metaphor is, but like, you know, like when you. I remember like watching, like, you know, because what did we get as queer people when we were in the 90s? We got Laramie Project, cool. Like gay man gets stringed to a fence. Like we get, you know, Brokeback Mountain, and then Jake Gyllenhaal. Yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal gets murdered. You get Boys Don't Cry. She dies. Like, or he dies. Like literally every queer narrative that was almost exclusively in drama existed for queer people to get murdered. And you're like, cool, so what's my life gonna be? But like, so it's like only recently have like things started opening up, and like I think I spent most of the pandemic looking for queer genre because I knew that it existed. And I'm talking about explicit queer genre, stuff that where people are gay or queer or anything. Because like before it was like, and even now I'm like, okay, so we had because first you winked at it, and then you called attention to it, but usually the gay people got murdered. And then we had all the queer love stories, the Call Me By Your Names, the way he looks, like ones that does not end in death. Which is great, and that's probably when I started seeing myself more. You know, cannibalism aside, Call Me by Your Name was like such a transcendent experience, like sobbing in a theater, being like, "Oh my God, I feel seen for the first time." But then now, which is where it's like, we have stuff like The Old Guard, like on Netflix, which we're like, the movie, like, people like don't like and don't like, but I love it so much because it was the first time I saw a gay couple with machine guns murdering a bunch of people and then also professing their love for each other. And I'm like, fuck. And so like I cried during that movie because I was like, I don't remember this. And this was a far step forward from like the gay kiss in the final Star Wars movie with two characters you don't even know their names. Like I'm just like, oh my God, here we are. Like, and I felt that same way about the Eternals. Like I know some people don't like the Eternals, but I was like, oh my God, like here's a main queer character who is responsible for the Holocaust, and maybe that's a problem. But like the rest of it, the rest of it is really cool. So like, it's really more modern stuff for me, like Rift or Thelma or Knife Plus Heart or Stranger by the Lake or Raw and Titan. Like I'm starting now to see myself in horror movies, where before that kind of wasn't a thing. It was like me sneaking to like maybe masturbate to Queer as Folk on the family television because that was the only queer stuff existed, or like Stanford or Will and Grace, San Francisco City, Will and Grace, whatever. And I saw myself, but now I'm like, oh shit, we get to be complicated now, and we get to be the murderers, and we get to be the people who, are the monsters or the saviors or the people with superpowers. Like that shit is my bread and butter. And that's what makes me really excited about this like last 10 years in film.
Yeah. No, and it's been a really exciting time, I think, to be a queer creator and a queer consumer in a lot of ways. And so I'm so glad that, so much of the world is opening up in that way. How about for you, Cypher?
I don't. What were we talking about? I was
Yeah.
just listening so intently, and then I'm like, "Wait, what's the baseline that we had?"
So honestly,
A question was asked. What was it again?
Well, okay, so look, you know what? I'm gonna steal this. Addison, I wanted to like yell, but I also wanted to listen to you at the same time because I was like, I grew up reading boys love comics from like Japan and Taiwan. I know. So I'm sitting here like, man, you should hang out with us. Like,
Asians is where it at.
Asian people were like, we get everything.
Yeah.
No, and I hear you, because that was the thing I thought was so weird, because it wasn't like, so of course different countries they call it differently, but I just call it boys love because it encompasses like Korea, Japan, and Taiwan.
Yeah.
And China too, don't sue me. But like they address what you're talking about, like the complicated stuff, and like when I read it, I'm like, oh, this is so like this is like Hannibal level of like planning. And people take like manga and anime as jokes. And I was like, no, there are people who do the things that you're talking about, the complexity. And that's why we still read smut comics to this day. Like I'm perfectly, it makes me happy. It breaks my heart. And then I'm like, please don't die.
Yeah.
But on that, like, okay, so what was the big question? I wanted to know.
No, but the main question was really just about, whether film can have an effect on your life.
Oh, so it does. It does. It's interesting. So for me, like Asian horror was like normal. I was like, why are people so scared? Because I'm a kid and I didn't know. I'm like, this is like Rabia was saying, like it's a mess. That's a whole different talk. But like, basically like I'm an orphan and all this crazy shit. After I was like, you know what? You guys are your own special something. I'm out. And like, I just fucking got out. But like Asian horror, I was like, that stuff's like normal to me. I was like, oh, like, okay, anger. Yep. No more check. Yep. People die. Like I see it. It happens. It's a regular thing. American horror was the other one where I was like, I don't get it. Like, I just like, it didn't click. Probably because like I don't relate to the people on screen, because half the time I'm sitting here like, why would you do that? Like, why is this thing happening? Like, and it was strange because like in Asian horror, without it being said to me, like I knew why certain characters felt a certain way and why they were behaving, based on the cultural structure and like hierarchies and all these different like contributing factors. And I'm sure like we can apply that to like the American system too, but it's not like when you watch the films, it's confusing. Like, because I'm just like, wait, people just go out to like fucking parties in the middle of nowhere, like, you know, wait, like this is a normal thing.
You
So
talk
yeah,
back
it's
to
like,
your mom and you only
It
get
is.
grounded and
no,
not
oh my
killed.
god, I was like, no. So my favorite thing is watching actors on Twitter like just talk about just whatever it is happening, and then a bunch of Asian actors going, you know, this is why we're not in Euphoria, because our parents don't, like, they knocked it into us to not do drugs. And I was like, wait, was this a problem? Who was complaining about Asians being in Euphoria? Like what? Something happened that this was a conversation.
Cypher,
like,
I can tell you, as a white guy that grew up in Kentucky, going out to a bonfire in the woods and getting drunk or high is pretty much what there is to do.
Like Adam, just to give you context, like if you grow up Asian, especially in the West,
Yeah.
like you could go to
You're
school
locked in a
and come
room.
back and your parents would be like, you went to a party and had drugs, didn't you? You're bringing shame to our family, didn't you? You party and had drugs. And I'm like, Mom, I went to math class. I'm sorry. You're talking back to me. Where's my slipper?
Oh no, I was raised in a church. Like there was lots of shame and guilt to go around about things that you didn't do.
Yeah.
You can't have a life. You can't, like, I used to sneak out of my house at like 2 a.m. just to go play Halo on like the fucking Xbox with some kid from school because I wasn't allowed out of my own house. Like, right? No, and then like, yeah, no, and then once I got to high school, I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm playing Final Fantasy Online, and I started skipping school just to play an online game because I was like, what's the difference? I still
Wait,
get the homework done, and I'm not
was
allowed.
was it Final Fantasy 11?
Yeah.
Oh my god, I was like fucking addicted to that game. I like almost lost like my grades because of that shit. Yeah. I was a Taru, Black Mage, and then eventually
Yes.
Red Mage. Yeah.
The
Oh my
red
god.
mage
Anyway,
outfit is the cutest thing in the world.
Yeah,
And I was like, how
yeah.
fucking hilarious it is to be a character that's like a foot tall with like a
Yeah.
toothpick sword, and it's like kicking ass and like
This
a dragon.
conversation is for no one else other than me and Cypher, but like I've literally not met another person who's played Final Fantasy 11. Like that game almost took over my life in my freshman year. My roommate was like, "Addison, you're not talking to anybody," and I was like, "Right, I think I have to put this down." But I miss it every
it's
day.
It's the easiest way to learn to do like Kirby emotes. We call it
Yeah,
Kirby
I know.
emotes, but
Because
it was just
I learned from all the Japanese players how to do all the emojis and stuff, and I was like, oh my god! And then I started watching anime. Anyway, yeah, I'm a little bit of a Japanophile.
well, speaking of that, like speaking
But
of
it's
cute little, like,
interesting. No. But this is very interesting, though, that like in this conversation, everybody seems to have a connection to some degree or another to Asian cinema and to Asian gaming culture and fandom and anime and manga. And I think it's really incredible how that seems to be a common thread that weaves through. And I actually wonder, like, for you, Cypher, when you think about, specifically the Asian community and your experiences with mental health within the Asian community, how have you seen portrayals of mental health within that community that, like, have
right.
there been portrayals that have really resonated with you?
Yeah, so Asia is very spiritual, right? Like it's very like, so when I say spiritual, for some parts, it's not necessarily religion, right? Like we're not like, oh, I'm a designated belief system. It is spiritual in terms of like energy. Like we believe in like positive and negative energy. So in like most of Asia, the belief is like if you are susceptible to negative energy, it's an indication that your mind is weak. So when we say this, there's a lot of people who are like, I see things, right? I see ghosts, I see goblins, I see demons. The indication is like that means that your mind, like your consciousness, is weak. It's susceptible to this influence. So this is mostly like a doorway like to depression. Depression's a silent killer, right? Like if you're seeing spirits, sometimes that's a person nearing the end of their life and they're susceptible to like crossing over. There's a lot of different things depending on where you are from. So in like Vietnam, for example, there is a belief that if you did not die at home, you are not allowed at home. Like you're not allowed to come visit your family in the afterlife, right? You're not allowed to as a little spirit come into the house and say, hey, like, how are you guys doing? We literally have shamans. Like you can hire a shaman if you're like, I lost a relative and they can't find their way home, and the shaman will help you like guide a spirit back and attach it to a person. So that's something a little similar in the West, where sometimes the language is like, oh, like a demon attached itself to you, like this energy, this form has attached itself to you. So with mental health, we don't go diagnosing people, right? So Tale of Two Sisters is a great example where it's all ghosts, it's all spirits, right? She's seeing things, she's in denial, but she's not diagnosed. So when you read about it in terms of like, I don't really know who writes this stuff, right? But they say like, oh, she has a dissociative personality disorder, but she's not diagnosed. Like in the actual film itself, they claim like she's possessed. She's possessed by these two entities, which is herself and in-home nurse, right? And she's all of these things of conflict. It's just her conflicting with herself because she's having these hallucinations, but she's basically two people, right? But they're not like there's not a physician to be there like you have X, Y, and Z. They were literally like she's susceptible due to all these things that happen. Now she's possessed by these things that happen, and she's not getting through it, right? So that's an example, and it's like I guess to help your audience get a better understanding. Like when the West talks about mental health, right? It's like this white dude's having a bad day. Unhinged with Russell Crowe is a great example of a dude having a bad day. Like he was like, fine, fuck this like life I have, and he started terrorizing someone that just cut him off in the street. And that whole movie is just a car chase, right? But then you have things like Lights Out, where there's like this manifestation. It's a little similar. Like it's a manifestation of this negative energy, except that we want to portray it as like a touch, like a thing that you can touch. But in Asian cinema, it's very like, it is like an internal battle. It's like whatever is happening with you within is like affecting everything around you to the point that you can't tell what is real and what's not. So to us, we can see it as like, oh, maybe it's PTSD, maybe it is depression, maybe it is schizophrenia, maybe it's all these different things, but they don't see it that way. Like, so through the Asian eyes, it's like you have reached a certain breaking point, and so you're now susceptible to this whole other realm. And to be able to deal with that, sometimes it deals with forgiveness or like, essentially letting go or finding your own way to like get through it kind of stuff. But they like to, we have black magic in the country too, right? Like Cambodia is, there's a little term called cottagecore. It is like people joke about how you cannot, like in the West, I saw Adam. So like I'm in Canada, people go to colleges for like vacations and stuff. Like this is a regular thing that people have told me. And I was like, yeah, you can't do that in Asia. Like you get haunted. You're going to get haunted. You're going to get possessed. Someone's going to put a curse on you. You fucking dead. Like that is the belief. Like if you brought that into like subtle Asian traits group, like they're going to be like, yeah, okay. You're never going to see me leave the city. Like people literally would like just find magic, get you, and then make you into their slaves. Like
Scare B&B over there.
Basically, like the cabin in the woods type of thing that would not happen in Asia, because
No.
Asian people would arrive at the cabin in the woods, look at it, and go like, my auntie said, or my grandma said I should not go.
I
It would
heard.
be a very short movie. It would be like them arriving, looking at it, going, grabbing all of like special items that their parents or their grandma gave them, throwing at it, and then just racing back home.
Like, we don't have priests to do exorcisms. We got shamans and like the local doctor. Like that's
We're
like,
so obsessed. Yeah, no, we're just so obsessed with religious horror in America. It's like so ingrained in our society. Like I feel like half the movies in America just come from religion and the devil and like all priests and all that kind of stuff. I
but
prefer
it's
it.
portrayed
Yeah.
differently. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's always like, so like in America, it's a I mean, like the religion, you have a figure.
Yeah.
But I think that's where it's like tricky, because in Asia, it's not a designated figure. You know, like people are like, oh, it's a goat. Like it's like, you know, it's a goat head and blah blah blah. But in Asia, it literally could be like your own relative, like who's dead, like you're a spirit pretending to be your relative, and then you're like, you got caught. You know, it's like a death trap. Like Art of the Devil 2 is a great example where the whole group of kids are led by a spirit of their friend, but they don't know that their friend was dead. And so this character is like essentially exacting revenge because of like things done years before, but it's also cottage country and like, you know, in Asia. So we're all just like, yep, like these people are finding all kinds of shit. They're literally like, you know, as Rabia, this is the thing that like scarred me. It was actually the first time I was scared in horror, because I understand how strong belief can be. And in this movie, they're like, we're going to go pray and ask for protection. And it was the first time, it was a very subtle scene, but each character lit an incense, placed it down, and then they were like, okay, let's leave. But as everyone leaves the room, the camera doesn't change. It pans down. And so we are following a stream of smoke. And then out of nowhere, it just stops. And then once it finally pans down to the ground, all of the incense that they lit was taken and shoved upside down and put out.
Mm.
And I was like, yo, I'm fucking done. I can't watch this movie. These kids are like out. Like you guys just didn't even like get out of the house in time. No,
Have you seen Incantation, Cypher?
no, I don't know what that is.
Is that the is that
Oh.
is that the new one? Is that the
So-
new one on Netflix?
Yeah, that is
came out?
a fairly new
I
one
saw
on
it.
Netflix.
Yeah.
And
The question is always, so because I'm in a different country, the question is whether or not it's available.
It's an
on
original
all,
movie.
yeah, it's on
it's a
all the
Netflix original movie.
Netflixes.
I
Yeah.
believe it's a Thai from Taiwan, right?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
Taiwanese horror, and it's basically about shamanism, how do you call that? Spiritual beliefs and
Yeah.
superstitions. That's what and especially if like I had a few people watch it, especially Asians. Like there are along the film certain phrases that she's asking you to say along with her,
Oh yeah.
and
And they won't do it.
well, the funny thing is, like, I know no Asian person or BIPOC in general will repeat those sentences just because they've been told. But I've seen a lot of TikToks of people, mostly white, who have seen that movie, who have done the incantations, and then at the end of the movie, were fucked up. And why I can't tell you because I don't want to spoil it for you, but
So with that being said, it's similar to like the bridge curse then. Where
It's-
so the bridge curse
yeah.
talks about mental health, because our main character is like, what the fuck? But it is the idea of like spirit, like negative energies attaching to people and taking form of what these people are freaking out. So I have seen the video game, and I thought the video game was fucked up already. I was like, I don't know if I can watch this movie if I'm watching the video game, because the video game makes you go through every character. And I was like, oh, like this is getting real. Like this is, well, it's also like teen drama shit. Like if you're interested to watch people's relationships completely like destroy each other, I'm like, oh, this is like fun. But it is like interesting because we don't address it as the way like in the West would. Like the West would be like, you can go to a therapist. Like literally there's no feelings doctor in Asia. Maybe now. Maybe now when they're like, why is our kids all leaving us and they don't want to come home? Like, you know, like it's New Year's. What the fuck are you doing? And it's like, I don't know. Maybe you should have asked me when I was a kid instead of locking me in a room and not letting me have friends.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because, you know, that sort of sense in Asian culture and other cultures as well that have been marginalized traditionally, like there is a sense that you do not air your dirty laundry by going to a therapist. You are not allowed to actually tell anyone what's actually happening, because that's a betrayal on some basic level. And so I find it kind of fascinating that you know, for all of us, like we all do work in the horror and mental health sphere in some degree or another. And I'm curious to know, maybe starting with you, Addison, if there is, you know, one particular MO, one sort of guiding point of light that you use in your own work to make sure that you're portraying mental health as best as you possibly can.
For sure. I mean, wow. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, like, listen, I tell, I mean, so far we'll see. I've yet to not tell a very personal story in my art, which makes it very strange because people end up knowing way more about me than they do about them, which is cool because it invites this kind of like open conversation where people feel like they can express things to me. And I've gotten used to that because I'm like, you know, people come up to me like, I'm gonna tell you my problems, and I'm like, great, I fostered this. That's the whole idea of like of this world. Does it get a little hard? Of course, because like, you know, you don't expect like five people to come up and be like, so this is my issue with my mother, and I'm like, yeah, fuck, it sucks. But like, you know, so I mean, I start from that. I just start from the truth and from the truth of like my lived experience and my sister's experience. My whole family suffers from mental health except for my father. He's just a lawyer. Anyway, I was trying to find the best way to say it. Just like very like doesn't understand it, but I think yeah, I mean like I've been in therapy for 7, 8 years. Like I obviously take meds and all that kind of stuff. I go through my lived experience. I think like I speak to my specific mental illness, which was like OCD and intrusive thoughts. Like, you know, that was like the most beautiful thing when I realized that thoughts aren't real. I really didn't know that for a while. I really was like, oh, I thought this thing, I'm a bad person. And I was like, I thought that for so long. And then you know, one time a therapist was like, you know, that thoughts, because I was like, the difference is like thoughts and actions. And I think what's really cool about horror is that like that's where we get to explore that idea of like going too far. But for me, um, I don't know if I'll ever be able to kill the person suffering from the mental crisis. Just as like kind of like the baseline of how I tell stories. Like murder has to come up. It's a horror. There are horror movies, and let me watch me write a slasher about a bunch of people suffering from OCD who kill each other, and it'll be fun. Like who knows? But like I don't know. It's like I think for me, I there's already so much crap happening in the world, and and don't get me wrong, I love when you know, Midsommar is kind of like a gut punch, and like good for him. I love watching people suffer, but like I. I like hope because I feel like that's like the last bastion of like humanity is hope. So like when I go to attack a script or when I go to write something, even if I'm feeling if I'm gonna put you through the ringer, if I'm gonna put you through all this suffering at the end, I think the whole it's not a responsibility of art because I'm not trying to say that like art has to be inherently moral, but in terms of like how I attack things, I'm like, okay, this has to say something in the lines of you know, it'll be hard to watch, but it's gonna be okay in in a sense, and not in the sense that I'm like I know what I'm talking about. I could just give you my perspective, but usually the more specific you are with your perspective, the more universal it ends up being. So that's kind of how I like attack my writing and my filmmaking and kind of what I aspire to. I just want to tell queer stories in the genre space to talk about mental health and hopefully, like, and hopefully shed a light on it, but also like you know be entertaining, but also like have this understanding that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, even if it's very, very, very dim.
I had a similar experience, Addison. Like when a Ghost Waits got out into the world, like it's a very personal, it's very small, it's a very personal film,
Yeah,
and just having people afterwards come up and like you know tell you things that they've never been comfortable saying to another person, or talking about like their own either their journey with mental health or their partner's journey and how like it's going to facilitate a conversation that they've never been able to have before because it gave them a perspective on the other person's struggle that they hadn't considered. And it was amazing. Like it genuinely, I made the movie to see if I was actually as alone in the world as I felt, and it showed me that I was not.
right.
To the question of like a guiding North Star, you know, I'm a big believer in make the movie that you wish was in the world. You know, what's not being said, find a way to say it in a way that feels real and that you haven't seen. And so it's not that I don't have another film or piece of art, but I named my company Rebecca Films, and Rebecca was my sister. My first real clear memory, like I have shards of memory, but like first real clear memory is the day my sister died of SIDS. It was morning. I remember my Return of the Jedi comforter on my bed. Like I remember hearing my mom and seeing her run across the doorway, and like. And so when it came time, anyone who's made a movie knows like it's stupid hard to make these things. And it's really like it's very tempting to like phone something in or kind of half-ass something just to get it kind of off your desk or just to get out of that conversation in the moment. And so I named the company after my sister to kind of keep me honest and to make sure that I never half-ass anything and I never phone it in, because especially at this level, and I think it's true at every level of filmmaking, like budget level, we're talking. But like at this, we're making stuff that's no budget, nano budget, micro budget, whatever you want to call it. You know, all you really have is your perspective and your voice and what you bring to it that no one else has. Your ingenuity, your resourcefulness, whatever that is, you know, at this level, like that's what you need to be. And yeah, you should be doing that. Like I think Rian Johnson does a great job at like working with a big budget and telling a story that still feels personal, but in a very entertaining way. Like he kind of marries those things. He's not the only one, but like that's just the person who left to mind because I was watching Glass Onion stuff earlier. But yeah, I think like you kind of have to find the thing that keeps you honest and that reminds you that like that it matters. You know, because like it's easy to say we're not curing cancer or whatever, or solving poverty and hunger, but like the art makes people feel better and it makes people feel less alone. So like it does matter what we're doing, and you kind of have to keep your eye on that pitch, you know, because there's just so much that comes at you when you start making movies, and you just need that one tuning fork that you can hit and like brings you back to the simplicity of purpose and mission, I think.
How about for you, Cypher? Is there a guiding star that you have in terms of your own depiction of mental health in your work?
So because I don't like address so it's interesting because in the West you guys address it, right? Like you actually have characters like I'm in depression. I don't like say that because like I explained earlier, in like Asian culture we just don't portray it as like these diagnoses or like these like things of people. Like we treat it as there's a person that is coping with something and needs ways to deal with it, right? So I don't address it like verbally. I mean, you can see things in my writing, right, that could indicate something's going on, but it's not going to be said. Like my guiding light in terms of my work is it's just love. I want everyone to feel loved, but I don't do like romance, like not that kind of love, like whether we're gonna find like camaraderie or connection. And so that's really what it is I want people to know that you are connected no matter where or what you are in the world. Like there is someone out there that has like a red thread attached to you. Like you are connected to someone no matter what. So so that's always been my driving force. Was everything that I write, it touches on like the human psyche. Like what choices would you actually take? So a little bit like James Wan and Saw, like I do like these things of what would you do? Would it be for the better of others, or would it be for yourself so you can survive? And I do know that this is a very different cultural thing because like in the East, it's a very we mentality. It's us, the community. We do this for us, where it's not the same over here. So it's very interesting to watch this like occur. But I still prefer to do this whole like reminding people like, look, we are loved. There are people that we can connect to and we can do this stuff. So like a great example is like I am working on a script that depicts like the clash of East and West. It is Vietnamese refugees with a child born in America, which is essentially a completely, like, they're completely removed from the motherland and all this stuff. So we're having clashes of this. And of course, there is mental health, because you cannot escape a war without having something fucked up. And it's the Vietnam War. So we're all kind of fucked up. So, but there is like this wholesome love in it because it is chosen family, which is against most Asian cultures' belief of that family, because generally it's blood, right? You're blood related. We do whatever, you deal with it. And in this case, we're going to address both and all these different things. So to like what Adam was speaking, when I had to get a translator, this is how I knew I was doing it right, was when I was hiring somebody. I found someone who did the translations that I needed perfectly well, because I lost my Vietnamese over time. So that's completely gone. And I needed someone that could actually get the tone, get the dialect correct, because we, you know, as everywhere you go, there's multiple dialects. And I was like, no, it needs to be true to this because the script is based on true events from my own like biological family. So moving forward, like this person, we're doing an interview and I'm giving her the backstory, you know, like we're talking about multi-generational. We got grandfather, father, refugee, then you got daughter born in America, and we got this happening, this clash that's happening. You know, and to explain the extremities, you know, I told her like, this is the extent of the depression and the PTSD. This is all the things that they're dealing. But because in Vietnamese culture, we don't talk about that. We don't have that. You know, the go-to word is something's wrong with your fucking head. Like they don't address it, right? She knew off the bat, and I knew I was doing something right because she started crying in the interview because she was like, it hit home like almost instantly. And she was like, I want to be on this job. Like, what do I have to do to get this job? And I was like, oh, okay. Like, here's the test. Just send it to me today, please. And then we can talk about this later. But someone's reaction, and she is also from the country. So she immigrated to America, whereas like I was born here. So we have this like disconnect as well. But seeing someone that actually is very close to home, speaks the language, still has family in both countries, and she's like crying, like reading the script. And I was like, okay, I did something right. Because I wouldn't expect that from a film. Like films for me, it takes a lot for you to like get me to cry. So to have someone read something that isn't even made yet, but like knows like what is happening and just starts like bawling, I'm like, okay, so that's what filmmaking is. Like, if she feels this way, there's probably thousands of more people out there that feels this way. I just have to go get it made so that they have something to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful. And I wonder, you know, I mean, I'm personally very optimistic about the future, knowing that all of the people on this call are out there making work that explores these ideas and, you know, is using these experiences for good, shall we say, instead of evil, which I hope we all are. But I wonder if I'm sorry, Adam?
Well, yeah, like I'm sorry to interrupt, but like it took us 5 years to make A Ghost Waits. We shot in August 2016, and it was put out in May 2021. And we were tinkering with the edit and sound mix up until the hour we delivered it to Arrow. Like it was constantly being worked on and revised, and so like a thing that I've thought about just in terms of like using it for good is like a friend sent me a script about like, hey, would you direct something like this? And I said, no, it's a good script, but like having lived in something, and I don't think every movie will take 5 years to make, but like having lived in a movie for 5 years, I'm very protective of like what I allow into my like marrow that way. So it needs to be hopeful, and it needs to be something that speaks to kind of the better angels of our nature, because like I have no, like I agree with you, Addison, that like art doesn't have to be moral. You know, it just has to be it has to be something that the artist is comfortable saying. You know, you have like if you're curious about why somebody is immoral, so you want to make something about an immoral character, your curiosity about that, I think, should be present. Like the point of what you're making. And so yeah, it doesn't need to be moral, but like your perspective on the amorality like should be there, I think. Yeah. And so I think that's kind of a decent barometer. Like, there's a scene, like the last thing we shot like 6 a.m, and I always say, like, when we're working on a scene, like, is this important enough that we would wake up at 5 a.m. to shoot it? And like that seems like a good barometer of, like, could we lose this? Like, if we were really tired, would we talk ourselves into losing this? Okay, then it doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
Interesting. Ariel, before you continue, because we have done a whole round of everyone else, but you're a filmmaker yourself. What is your relation with mental health and horror, but also in your filmmaking? Because I don't want to leave your experience out of this as the only non-filmmaker in this group. Please do share and finish your thought first, because I know you were going to say something.
Well, no, I mean, for me as a filmmaker and as a writer and director and so forth, I feel like, when we made our first priority, I was very much guided by a lot of my own explicit mental health problems related to medical gaslighting and anxiety. And I very explicitly wanted to have an uncomfortable conversation about how you have to literally lie and deny your own experience when you're in the doctor's office in order to be heard. And how, your relationship with your trauma is something that's kind of omnipresent and always there. But what's interesting for me kind of as a guiding star going forward, like in the work that I'm writing now, I feel like as long as we're telling stories that are told with compassion around the idea of mental health, and you don't even necessarily have to explicate everything, but you do have to spend some time digging into the complex nature of what it is to experience these things in a way that other people can also understand, I think. Because ultimately, I don't think it's very interesting to go into a clinical explanation that doesn't derive something from subjective experience. I think subjective experience is the thing that unites us and is ultimately going to change the world. I'm sorry, I sound incredibly naive when I say that, but it's true. That's what I genuinely believe. And so I'm really hoping that through compassion and subjective experience, I can change the world. Okay, I said it. But
Listen,
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, just like, yeah, I mean, we could all just like, I'm an artist, I don't matter, like, those are fart noises coming from my mouth. I don't know. I always talk about this because obviously I have a movie that is about my mental health, and people have come up to me afterwards and said that the movie meant so much. But I'm also like not a person who's like I'm the best thing in the world. But also, what did we do when the pandemic happened? We all turned to fucking Netflix. We watched everything. Like that entertainment, that is a necessary part of culture. It's necessary, whether or not we're like, yes, and we have people who are doing open heart surgery and like developing vaccines and all this kind of shit. But like, I don't know what I would do if I didn't have horror movies. Somebody asked me the other day, she's like, yeah, I had a lot of friends going to law school. And I'm like, yeah, and that's totally cool. She's like, would you ever do something else? And I'm just like, I just don't know. I'm not good at anything else. Like, I physically couldn't. I just don't know what I would do. I'm like, I wouldn't be a good server. Like, I'd be awful at it. And like, I wouldn't be like, I wouldn't be a good like insurance seller. I don't know why that's the thing that I brought into it. But like, I wouldn't do it. I couldn't. But it is an interesting thing because artists kind of are the intersection of all of the classes.
We're all artists until you have to pay the bills.
Right.
That's
generally
it. Like, if everyone had a choice, we would be creative until you find out that doesn't put food on the table. But I agree with you, Addison. Like, I'm the same way. Like, when I left animation, I was like, well, what would I do if I like? And there wasn't there wasn't really anything else. Like I only care about storytelling, and it's always
Right.
been like that. Like since I was a kid, like Rabia was talking about, I'm sitting on like Guy Online, and I'm like, I'm just gonna write these stupid ass stories forever. And then I was like, yeah, just be a writer. That's all I could do. Like I could visualize everything, make a film. That's all I can process. So just do it. And some people just have that stronger calling. Like some people just know that, like, you know, I love people in the legal system because they are so objective. Because once they start talking, you're like, oh, this is what fairness looks like. But that's not how we talk on a regular day, right? But like everything else is, you know, if people love it, then it's like, well, what can we ask for more, right? As long as you're doing something that you love, because we know how ugly resentment looks like, you know, when people don't get to do what they want or with the time they want or whatever. And it's like, you know, I'd rather, if someone doesn't want to work, I'd rather you just don't work.
Yeah.
So.
I want to use the experience of what you three just shared to kind of segue into something, because I think it's interesting that subjective representation or subjective perspectives, people consuming a lot of media during the pandemic, and then also, you know, just doing what you love. How do you all feel? And we'll do a roundabout, but how do you all feel about representation of mental health in horror on screen? Because all of you have brought it into your work in some capacity, either, you know, as the highlight and the star of the show, or as a subtle underline. So when it comes to mental health and representation in horror, in media, how do you feel how that the current state is? And whoever wants to jump on that first may go.
I'll steal what Adam said earlier. There's shit out there, but there is also good things out there. So like I say this because like that docuseries, the Cecil Hotel, poorly handled, right? Like the damage that family probably went through because of how someone wanted the world to think this poor girl was murdered when in fact she was diagnosed with bipolar, and we just for some reason just neglected this detail and decided that the last 15 minutes after 4 episodes it was worth saying that, oh, she basically died by accident. I think, you know, we have cases like that. We have awful cases where people mishandle the information. They portray it however they want because it's fiction. Because it's fiction, we can do whatever we want to say. But then you have people like Jennifer Kent, who did the Babadook, who addresses it in a most likely realistic way. I'm sure someone out there is like, yeah, I have to live with my grief forever, and this is how it feels. You know, Relic is another one, another Australian director. You know, dementia in its own manifestation, right? Like, I think these are appropriate because most of the time it's like, oh, everyone's a sound mind and able-bodied and doing whatever, and this horrible thing happened, and suddenly they just had a psychotic break. And it's like really like Session 9 is a great one where yes, it's a incredibly unsettling and like terrifying movie, but most of the time we're not violent. Like mental health is not violent. And most of these movies back in the day is like, oh, your psychotic break causes you to murder everyone. It's like, does it though? Like, is it really? You know, and that's being like neurodivergent. It's like, oh, like you get set off by this one little thing and then you just go on a murder spree. And it's like, you know, this is inaccurate, right? Like, I mean, part of it too, like in the West, I find like idolism is like a big thing too. Like it completely distorts people's like reality because they just idolize something. Take something, put it on a pedestal, right? So like you have Spree, which is a fun, great one where it's just, how do I do this, right? And I'm just gonna fucking go ham. But we have other versions of this too, where, you know, women chasing the fame and completely sacrificing mind, body, and health to be famous in Hollywood, right? Like it is, you know, I understand the idea of fiction, but there is a level of respect that needs to be made because there are people who get hurt by this, especially like in true crime. True crime you get it's 50-50. Either they handle it respectfully well, like the Golden State Killer, or you have something terribly like played out just for someone's like interest, like Hotel Cecil. So
Or Tiger
that's
King.
Yeah, or the one about the family who were found all hanging in India. I don't know if you
Yes.
saw that one, the documentary on Netflix.
I
was
saw
like,
a clip. Mhm.
it goes in all directions until it doesn't. I was like, okay, wow.
Yeah, I mean, another one is like don't fuck with cats. Where
Don't
the
fuck
whole
with
family was
cats.
like, yo, what about the guy? What about the no, they don't care. They cared about this wannabe that, the excuse could be, and that's the other thing is the excuse is mental health, right? Like the excuse is being mentally ill. Whenever there's a mass shooting, child grooming, name it. Like I mentioned Unhinged earlier, but that's that. Unhinged was like the excuse was, well, he was having a bad day. Really, like a bad day causes you to want to go try to fucking murder a family that has nothing to do with you, like they're complete strangers, or like several other issues that happen in the West. Like it's like the term itself is just convenient, and that's not how it should be. Someone's identifier should not be weaponized for someone else's benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's a great point. I love that. Specifically, I want to emblazon that on a t-shirt right now. But yeah,
I think this is tied to like a problem in all film right now is like you have a lot of people making movies because they grew up wanting to make movies, not so much that they have a story that they need to tell, but like they see movies as a party they want to be at. And then you have books like Save the Cat that like basically teaches an accountant how to talk about story. So they think like, oh, if I just follow this beat sheet, then I'm gonna make a movie, and like it's
very unnatural.
Yeah, and it's like you're idiot-proofing a system that should very much not be idiot-proofed.
Wait, but Adam, you don't have 30 scenes until you're inciting incident, and then you have 15 scenes to tell me what's up? Like that's not how life works.
Okay, I know we make fun of Save the Cat, but I put a Save the Cat scene in my movie, and it's a lot of people's favorite scene because they're like, "Oh yeah, once he brings her out of a panic attack, I'll follow him everywhere." And I'm like, "Fuck, I hate this." Girl,
I love that.
All you wrote was blank check, and you love talking about how you wrote blank check, but god damn it, if that scene does not necessarily really help you. Anyway, that's not what we were talking about, but that stupid fucking book did help me.
Well, I mean,
but I get what you're saying though. It's just like, yeah, it's not like a paint my numbers thing. It's like, yeah, there's a structure to it, but if you don't have the underlying reason why, it's always like, why me, why now? Like,
right.
And why this story? Like all of these things.
The driving purpose, right?
Yeah,
like
the driving purpose
call.
to create. Yeah.
I genuinely believe like all of writing is just joke structure. What do I need to know, and why do I need to know it? Like that's
so. Yeah, so like in anime, so that's why I find filmmaking so interesting, because in animation you don't have fluff. Like you don't get to put stuff in there and then be like, is it gonna work? Because you're working with artists that have to basically make these assets out of nothing. So the budget doesn't cover that. So you have to make sure what's in there is needed, and then what you don't need, get it out. Because mostly studios don't want to pay their artists like a month, right, of salary to go make this thing that you end up cutting, and it's like it's such a go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was gonna say I was gonna put an asterisk in there and say like Western as animation, whereas if you look at anime and you look at Ghost in the Shell,
no, they don't care. They're like, we're gonna do everything. And
yeah,
the,
like
the
Ghost
writing,
in the Shell has a 7-minute sequence that is just like the city.
So it's because the writing structure is different. So in Asia, in terms of like manga artists and anime, like you have like 3 types of writers, right? You got the planners that want to plan everything, the arcs, the major arcs, and then the seasons and all that extra fun stuff. Then you have the people who are like the ones that just go. So that's usually like the anime that you kind of find like it's kind of weak because you're like, what's happening? And it takes like the first 10 episodes or the first 30 chapters for you to be like, oh, I see what's happening. those are the people who are just like, no, I'm just gonna start drawing and like, oh, we'll figure it out, right? Like we'll figure it
We'll
out
end
as
up
we go.
somewhere.
And then, yeah, and then you got the third one, which is a mix of the two, right? Because the attitude generally is like, just get started and go, because they want to get serialized. Well, you know, you start as a manga or comic artist, so you want to get serialized, get that money in, keep on going. Whereas in the States, that's not the case, right? You guys got writing rooms, but for animation, you don't always have writing rooms either. Like it's the creator, because they show up with like, look, I made a comic, let's make it move, right? So they don't usually have people sitting there in like a 10 person room being like, well, what should we do for like season 2? Like, should we have them like we don't have that. So a lot of the times, especially with animation being shorter, you know, we got 22 minutes, they're like, no, we need to like hit done. But when you have 60-minute like dramedies and stuff, they're just like, well, like what's the character relationship? And that's the other thing too. In like the Western world, you guys care about your characters, you care about your relationships. But like in like Eastern, like anime, for example, right? The relationships start later. Like you guys just gotta know what's happening now, know what's at stake, know what all these people want, and then we watch these relationships develop. But a lot of times, like in like TV drama, like you're trying to establish these relationships before like the goals or before like the conflict. And it's like, for some people, we're like, I don't give a fuck. Like it's like the moment that conflict happens, they're like, ooh, now I'm interested.
Yeah.
But like it's a different way of storytelling. I mean, like Eastern storytelling does care about characters, but we care about like the essence of these characters, like what, like the themes of friendships, like love and everything. And we like to ride that wave of developing it as we go, so that the audience come with us. And I find like so I don't actually watch a lot of Western TV because I get bored because of this fact. Like they try to establish the history of everybody, right? Like why we're in this family, why this is happening. And I'm like, I don't care. I guess I'll watch episode 3 when shit's actually happening. And then I can see this happen, because it's different than being like, oh, she's so sweet and nice. And it's like, no, I want to see this. Like, how is she sweet and nice? Why is she coming home at 11? It turns out she's like fucking cleaning someone's house for you. Like, you know, but they want to establish this in like exposition. And it's a different rhythm.
A completely different rhythm.
And it's interesting episode of the Cypher Show, because this has been fascinating.
Bring us back, Ariel. Bring us back.
I would love to bring absolutely everybody on this panel back, because, like, honestly, the chemistry among everybody is just incredible.
Addison and I can talk about video games.
Oh my god!
We would have to call it like the Ghouls fandom and everything else in the world show. Like, we couldn't call it disability and horror, because we're definitely wide-ranging in this group. I tell you.
Ghouls presents everything.
Could we call it like a bunch of NDs in a pod?
Are we Skittles?
I love it.
We could be Skittles.
Oh yeah,
I like that.
Skittles with you guys anytime.
Awesome.
Taste the rainbow.
Okay. Well, we have to do a really quick once around. We literally have 2 minutes before our cutoff time happens. So
cool.
I need everyone to go around real quick and say where people can find you on social media. But this has been a delight. So
definitely.
All right, Adam, go.
I am on Twitter at Adam Stovall and on Instagram at NotAdamS.
Addison.
Yeah, I'm mostly on Instagram at AddieBear5. I'm on Twitter, but I don't tweet. I just doom scroll. But it's at AddieBear555. So you can find me there and then DM me and tell me how much you like Hypochondriac, which you can rent on Amazon and Apple. Okay, I'm done.
All right, Cypher.
I'm on Twitter and Instagram as Dr. Pudgy Pudgy, Dr. Pudgy Pudgy. I'm just like Addison. I'm only on Twitter to look at my smut comics, and then I post my actual work on Instagram. Also follow at Hard Luck Sessions for the audio dramas and the short films dropping in October.
Very cool.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Well, we unfortunately have to get going, but this has been a delight. I hope that all of you have a wonderful day, and that those of you who are still on with us will be able to join us again when we come back with our next session on disability and horror and community. All right. Cool. Thank you, my loves.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.